Yes, TNT, today's news talk. And this morning, I'm happy to be joined again by my old chum, Geoff Thompson, aka Geoff Buys Cars. He's out and about at the minute. Actually, I think he's enjoying the bank holiday. Looks like the weather's pretty good from where he is at the minute. I'm looking out the window here and it's just grey and overcast. But, Geoff, welcome back to TNT. And what are the plans for this Easter? Are you going far?
Good to be back with you again, Rick. We are jumping in. I'm in the radio car today, the radio car. So this is my 850 T5, another high mileage Geoff car. And we're off up to Scarborough and we're having dinner this evening with a chap who wrote quite an important book called The Falsification of History. So if anybody's read that book, we're going to have dinner with John Hamer tonight and sit
Very
down with
good.
him and maybe he can put me right about what's going on in the world because I don't know what's going on in the world. It's all crazy to me.
So you mentioned an 850 T5. Sounds like suspiciously like a Volvo to me. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This one's a Volvo saloon. 240,000 miles on this one, so just warning.
Well, let me tell you this. I think I've mentioned this to you before. We shared first cars together. You had a little, in fact, even the color was the same, a little Poseidon green Citroen Saxo VTR VTS. Now you're running around in a 240k Volvo. My last car before it died on me and I vowed I would drive it to death was a Volvo S40. I bought it in 2006. I put about 250,000 miles on the clock. That thing was absolutely bomb-proof, but literally I drove it until it could be driven no more. And apparently the word on the street is Volvo are going to be doing away with their diesel cars, which will come as a blow to many people because they rely on them and they've got literally a ton of mileage out of them.
Well, that's right. I mean, Volvo cars are famously long-lasting cars, and surely if you're going to do good for the planet, you want things to last longer. But Volvo have now announced that they are ditching. I think they've already made actually the last Volvo diesel car, which was an XC90. So that's it. No more diesel cars. Fully invested in the electrical future. Obviously, they're now owned by Geely, a Chinese company. So there's not much left of the real Volvo heritage that comes from this car that I'm sat in now. It's a long distant relation, and there's not much DNA of the old Volvos that we all love in the new stuff anyway. But it is a bit of a blow for petrol heads, and I suppose you call them diesel heads, that there's no more diesel engines. And I think all that's going to do really is impact Volvo's share price and push the price of used diesel Volvos up because people do still want them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, if mine hadn't have literally packed in and quarter of a million miles is some going, and it was driven hard by me over the years. I bought it new and I thought to myself, it'll be the last new car I ever buy. That was back in 2006, and I vowed that it would run it into the ground, and it did. It actually got to the point where it was costing me thousands every year with, alternators and gearboxes and, clutches gone and the bearings are gone, and it literally fell apart on me. So that's why I gave it up, not because I wanted rid of it, because it simply had to go. And I don't know if it was on your page or not. By the way, you can follow Geoff on Twitter or X at Geoff Buys Cars, Geoff Buys Cars, or his YouTube channel, Geoff Buys Cars. I don't know if it was from you I picked this up, but the biggest car theft in history was actually committed by the North Korean government. They ordered a fleet of Volvos from the Volvo plant up in Scandinavia. When they were delivered into North Korea, they simply didn't pay them. And they said, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to come over here and try and take them back again? So apparently that was the biggest car theft in history involving Volvos too. So the Volvos everywhere.
Absolutely fascinating story, that, isn't it? And yeah, it is strange that you go over there and there's all these Volvos running around that were never paid for. I think that's one of those little anecdotes from the past that I do really enjoy that actually happened. It's quite funny that.
It is now something else that's going on at the minute. Not so funny, really. And by the way, Geoff is definitely the first time me and Geoff, Geoff and I talk, depending which way you want to look at it, very car centric. But you are interested and pay a lot of attention to stuff that's going on outside of the motor industry. Okay, so you're observing what's happening in the world at the minute. You're observing the scandals that are happening. You're throwing your opinions in certain other topics, which I think is great because you have a really good platform and you've got a really attentive audience that will maybe take into consideration things that you bring forward and things that you have to say. So another thing I noticed just from your YouTube channel that you put up a few days ago was to do with Fujitsu, the company Fujitsu. So a company that's already disgraced, getting a contract to provide a service that the public have already shown that they don't want in relation to digital IDs. Fujitsu, digital IDs. What could possibly go wrong there, Geoff?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, so the channel started as a car channel, but I do touch on anything that is going to impact our freedom. And like I've said many times before, I just want to be left alone to enjoy my old cars. And anything that is going to infract on my ability to be able to do that does end up on the channel. Whether that's, what's going on with digital ID or whatever's going, even the weather or whatever it might be. But we've had this massive scandal unfold in the UK about Fujitsu and what had gone on with their software and the Horizon thing that went down with the post office. And it's absolutely insane because Fujitsu were in the wrong. They were proven to be not offering the service that they were being paid for. And in that case, with the post office scandal, people lost their lives. There were multiple suicides because people were being blamed for something that they hadn't done to do with stealing money. Money had gone missing, and it was the fault of the computer systems. And Fujitsu had always said it's not the computer systems that are at fault, but it was. And these people killed themselves. People lost their lives over this. So this company, as far as I'm concerned, shouldn't be anywhere near government contracts as a result of this. And they absolutely shouldn't be anywhere near digital ID. Which, as I've already said, I think it was about this time last year, I did a video on the proposed consultation for digital ID, and the people were dead against it across the board. Nobody wants digital ID to come in because everybody can see that digital ID is one step closer to absolute control. We don't want digital ID, and we absolutely don't want a company that is disgraced and should be nowhere near government contracts and taxpayer money to be running it. It's a huge scandal.
It is without any shadow of a doubt, and of course, it's being pushed as something that'll be for our benefit, Geoff. It's going to make you safer. It's going to make your identity safer. It's going to stop scammers. It's going to stop this. It's going to stop that. It's for the greater good. Of course, that's the way it's being positioned. But of course, that's most likely not. Well, the reality will most likely be something completely different if they get their wicked ways and they do get this implemented. I'm not sure if you've been following what's happening in Australia at the minute, but they have passed the law, pretty much kicked it into touch, went through the Senate last week, that they are bringing in a digital ID system in Australia this year. So I very much believe that place is going to be a test bed for this going forward, the same way it was a test bed for lockdowns and mandatory vaccinations to keep your job as well. So that's something else to bear in mind too. We've got to take a quick headline break, and when we come back at the other side, I want to look at some of the other things that are doing the rounds this bank holiday weekend. Get your thoughts and opinions on those, so don't go away. We'll be right back. Yes, this is TNT, today's News Talk, and Geoff Thompson, my old chum Geoff buys cars. He's in the car. He's about to embark on a large commute at the minute. We're trying to reconnect back with him again. Lost a little bit of connection there. We would have had him on until 22, but I'm just going to talk anyway. And again, just addressing the comments in the live chat. Sorry, I know some people, little Carl in particular, I'm sorry. That was a little bit mean, that April Fool of mine, but listen, I'm not going to lie, I have a little bit of a mean streak in me. I take some pleasure in the suffering and the misery of others sometimes. So I do apologize for that. I would have let you in on the joke a little bit earlier, but we were covering a very heavy subject and I didn't want to do an April Fool's off the back of it. So that's why I asked Gemma to do another little headline before I, confessed to my trolling. So anyway, live chat's very much up and running. Of course, you're free to contribute to it in any way you want, or not, just simply sit back and listen to what's happening. So some other news headlines that are breaking here this morning that I didn't get talking about at the start of the show, I'm going to look at them right now. Following off the back of Geoff Rick Donaldson's resignation as Deputy First Minister, and of course, or not Deputy First Minister, the leader of the DUP, and he's been suspended from the DUP. He's over in Westminster at the minute, and the DUP are ultimately in a little bit of a tailspin right now. So Edwin Poots has been approached about making a dramatic return to frontline politics as the DUP grapples with the Donaldson crisis. He's been asked to consider standing down as Stormont Speaker and put his name forward for DUP deputy leader. So Poots is very much an old hand in the DUP, one of the more traditional unionists that would be in the DUP, the like of him, the like of Sammy Wilson. So I don't know if they're trying to convince him to come back and add a little bit more stability there. I don't know what the reasoning and the thinking is behind that, but no doubt over the next week, we're going to see a lot of movements and changes within the DUP. Of that, we can be no doubt. Also in Ireland, I believe we've got Geoff back again. Geoff, we're reconnected again.
You're never going to believe this, Rick. My iPhone overheated.
Are you sure it wasn't an energy weapon that was directed at that old Volvo of yours by the World Economic Forum? Because you're not just talking about cars anymore, you're becoming a danger to the globalists.
I reckon that's what it might be. You know, maybe they're after me. I mean, to be honest, I find it quite bizarre that my phone was there balanced on the windscreen of the Volvo. This is the first day this year where we've had enough blue sky for that to happen, and there we go. The weather cut me off. You can't make it up, can you?
Well, you would think you couldn't make it up, but actually you can, and that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about, Geoff, during the course of this show as well. Listen, I remember years and years ago, and I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of this because we don't have time, but I remember years and years ago, people used to bang on about chemtrails. They're spraying the skies. I never took much consideration of it, to be honest with you. I know there are contrails that disappear rapidly after they've been, spewed out behind the aircraft. But chemtrails, people spraying the sky, seem to be a wacky theory. I believe tinfoil hat territory. But over the years, the more that you see this and the more that you look above your head and you see these bizarre crisscross patterns across our skies, and then the next day you've got grim, grey, soulless, drizzly, cold, wet, miserable weather for sometimes weeks on end, you've got to be thinking to yourself, there must be something in that.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one because for some people it is it's a theory too far, and I'm not one of these people that is going to say exactly what's going on. I like to talk about it in a very basic sense, which is if you look up and see all of the lines in the sky, not long after that, the lines spread out and the sky goes grey. I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you what it's for. All I can tell you is that that's what I'm seeing with my own eyes. And you can pretty much predict that if you do have an evening, usually it's a nice blue evening, and then you got all these lines that start to appear and then they spread out, and pretty much the next day is going to be, as you say, a kind of weird, unnatural sort of grey, a complete blanket across the entire sky. And it does seem to be happening all over the place, and there does seem to be a correlation. But I mean, if you ignore the lines in the sky, let's just ignore those for the moment. We have had some weird weather this year, and the skies have been absolutely crazy. And all I say to people is just look up and tell me if these are the same skies that you remember when you were a kid. Because I don't have all the answers as to what's going on, but I certainly don't remember seeing skies like this all those years ago when we were little. How about you?
No, I agree with you 100%. I would fall into the same category as you. I don't have the answers. I don't know who's doing this. I don't know exactly why they're doing it or what the rotas are. But what I do know is, and this thing happened here yesterday. You said about your blue skies today. Yesterday here, we had the most beautiful spring day. The skies were clear, and then all of a sudden, the streaks started to appear. They started to spread out, and I said, right, tomorrow will be this miserable, grey, weird, unsettling blanket dropped across the country with a drop in temperature. And it's every time you look up and you see those lingering trails, multiple lingering trails starting to spread out, it's almost a given that the weather will be grim, at least over here, for a week or two afterwards until they resume whatever activity it is that they're getting up to. So just interested to get your take on that. I'm the same. Don't have the answers. Don't know what's, the mechanics behind this is, but I do know when I look up and I see those lingering trails that are spreading out slowly over an afternoon or evening, I know what's coming the next day. I've another article here just to touch on with you briefly to do with EVs. This is to do with Apple and also a company over in, is it Korea? Xiaomi, Xiaomi. Xiaomi's secret to surviving the EV price war. They have over $18 billion in cash. So it's actually a Chinese company here that said they're going into the EV market. They've got 18 billion in cash to ride out the waves. And then Apple were given a hard time about this because apparently Apple is sitting on 162 billion and they didn't have the balls to launch an EV after working on one for years, says a commentator Twitter. Maybe they're just savvy business people, Geoff, and they're not prepared to go into a market that they can maybe see the writing on the walls. Maybe nothing to do with their lack of business acumen and willingness to take chances. Maybe they know what's coming.
I think it's really interesting if a company, with the reputation of Apple, isn't taking the plunge in electric cars. Doesn't that just say everything? And with the other one that I can't pronounce, something that I'm starting to see now in the UK on our Auto Trader, where we go to shop for cars, I'm starting to see these EVs from these Chinese companies pop up for sale. And I'll tell you what, they ain't cheap. I saw one yesterday and it was getting on for £50,000. Now, who in their right mind, particularly in the UK, where people are generally, quite careful, who's going to drop £50,000 on an unknown EV from an unknown brand that has just arrived from China? I cannot see any of them selling, and that's not going to help the depreciation. So I really don't see a way out of it. So, these Chinese companies, they might have all this cash in reserve, but I just don't know how they're going to get the people to buy them. Buying a £15,000 electric MG is one thing, but these 50, 60, 70,000 pound unknown name brand EVs from China, I just don't see them shifting.
No, and you mentioned as well about Apple's hesitancy to go into the market. Let's think about this for just a minute. Whether or not you like or despise Apple products, it can be very polarizing. Personally, I think they've been innovative. They've been trailblazers. You look at the iPod. Remember the original iPod that came out that you could store your music on. Of course, then Spotify came out. You had the iPad, the iPhones. You can hardly accuse Apple of not being prepared to take a chance whenever it comes to innovation and putting a product on the market that no one else has done before. So I would say, given their track record, if they're giving this one a pass, if they're giving this EV market a pass at this point in time, whenever everybody else would have you believe now's the time to get into it, they should at least be taken into consideration as to why they're not doing it. I mean, they're not rank amateurs.
Absolutely. I think the fact that they're not wanting to get involved does say it all. But we're seeing other things as well on the EV side of things. So there was a big hoo-ha recently when Renault launched their new Renault 5, which was supposedly all electric. Now, I've seen on the internet yesterday that there's some areas of the Renault website where it's now being suggested that car is also going to be available as a petrol hybrid. So they've launched this car to be all electric. Oh, isn't it going to be fantastic? It's going to be electric only. And then they've looked at what the market has done and thought, hang on a minute, we better put a petrol engine in it so we can sell some. And I think we're going to be starting to see that across the board as well. Maybe these manufacturers can recover some of the losses that they've made on these EVs by quickly backpedaling and doing the best they can with petrol and diesel. So there's hope for us petrolhead yet.
Always, because you know what? There's too many of us, and it's these narratives that are being sown by the the government and by the mainstream media that EVs are the way forward. Everyone's going to have one by 2030 or 2035. They're going to do away with internal combustion engines. There's just simply too many of us that will not happily give that up or forgo that because we simply like our cars too much, and that's all there is to it. Nothing's going to change that. And I appreciate your input this morning. I know it's a bank holiday and I know you're on your way. You're about to make a journey. So we just want to appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me this morning. That's Geoff Thompson. Geoff Buys Cars on YouTube, and follow him on the Twitter platform as well at Geoff Buys Cars. Geoff, thanks again. And I'm wishing you a little bit of blue sky for this afternoon. I'm hoping and praying your iPhone doesn't catch fire and melt its way through that dashboard of that lovely old Volvo of yours. And all being well, if the planets all align, we can talk again maybe in another few weeks' time about what's happening in the UK. What do you reckon?
Rick, I reckon that sounds pretty good. And at the end of the day, if the battery in my iPhone does catch fire, I can just throw it out the window as opposed to sitting on top of it and having, my wife and my kids sat on top of a giant overheating battery. I'd much rather be able to throw the battery that's overheating out the window and carry on in my Volvo. So I'll catch up with you next time.
Yeah, you take care, mate. And that's not the kind of Easter barbecue we want. No, roadside barbecues, not in-car barbecues. That's a fact. So, Geoff, thanks to you, mate. Safe travels, and we'll stay in touch and speak sooner rather than later. That's the wonderful Geoff Thompson. Got to take a break right now. And when we come back at the other side, we've got Basil Valentine joining us to talk about some UK issues.